Okay, so I was trying to find a good place that would talk to us about using nodes in our data structure and using our Java. Nodes are a really important idea. Like as we move forward with our Java learning and like as we kind of get through these advanced data structures, nodes kind of keep coming up again and again. So I thought that I tried to find a good video that might be concise enough for this, but um, everything else is pretty long. So I'm going to make this kind of short video and maybe I'll attach some more longer, uh, more in-depth videos later on. But I think especially for us being in IB computer science, like we kind of already know some things about the way that memory is set up in a computer. So, like we have all these memory addresses in the computer. We could think of these as being like locations, suppose in like the RAM. And we know that data is allocated to these memories. Let's call this RAM. And the data that's stored in there is, there might not always be enough room. Like if we make when we want to put a bunch of data in there, we need to make sure that like we might not always have. Kind of repeat myself here a little bit, but like if we have these, say we have just this section of data for some reason, and we want to make a ideally, and we want to add, we want to store 4 values like 3, 5, 7, 10. Well, we ideally want to store these in an array where we can kind of put all the values next to each other. We kind of store them in order, but we don't really have all of the. That's not really possible here, right? Because we have this kind of broken up stretch. And you might imagine if there's a lot of things saved into your RAM or into your data, like there's not always going to be a clear open stretch of where you can store all these datas in a kind of line, kind of right next to each other, like we might like. So what we can do in this instance is we can make something called a node. And a node is basically, it's a structure of data that has 2 major things to it. Maybe I can make this a little bit bigger. Let's make a node a little bit bigger. There's basically, so it's a data structure. It's a way of holding data, and it really holds 2 things. One, it holds some values, and then it also holds the address of the next piece of data. Run that space there. So like when we start reading this, we'll find the values here, and then we'll get to the end, and then this is going to link on to another node that will also have a value, and it will also have the address of the next node. And we could think, and like hopefully what this should be making you think about is like blockchain, right? Because that's what blockchain does. We have these blocks. It's a little bit different because the data getting stored is different, but this kind of node and having the address of the next piece and making a chain should be kind of familiar to us from doing blockchain. So what's good about this is that now in our data, we don't necessarily, if we want to put this like array of values into memory, we don't necessarily need to have all the pieces right next to each other. We can have some values here, and then we can kind of link to we could have values next to each other and then link to another part in the list. Typically we have just kind of one value and then link to the next one in there. But we can spread this data all the way out. I can do also a bunch of other things. I think this will get more into, so I think the node idea is important, and then maybe I talk a little bit about like singly linked lists. But like this could be really important because if we think back to an array, like I make a new integer array, and it's going to be of size new int, and it's going to be a size 5. Like what we said was we can't ever change that, right? Because an integer array an array has a fixed size. But now what we could do with this node thing is, like that's great. I mean, but obviously if we want to add 6 or 7 pieces, that's a bit of a problem. With a node, we can start to add things in. We can start to extend our array. So instead of having this fixed length, we can use nodes to create new data structures where instead of having these things all kind of linked to each other, we'll have one that kind of links off to another part, And we can mess around with these addresses and values to erase these. Like so we have this kind of connection here. We could also, I'm going to run out of space here. We could also do things like this and say, well, actually, no, I don't want to go here. That's not the next thing on the list. Let me insert something. Oh, I want to keep that thing over here. Let me insert something, and now we're going to link over to this, to some new thing that's going to link back to this. So we can, like, by messing around with the address here, we can insert something new and say, no, now you're going to point to this. And this thing will take up the will point on to the next thing. So that's what a node is. A node is the data structure that contains values, and it contains the link in memory to the next item in the list. So we're going to see this a lot as you go through some of these videos today, where they're talking about whether they're talking about stacks or queues, or they start talking about trees. All of them are going to contain nodes. So this is my brief attempt at trying to cover the topic in 5 minutes. It's a really large topic, but I think it does tie into a lot of things we already know, like like the actual physical structure of the computer and how things are stored in memory. Knowing those things means that hopefully we can take that knowledge and then apply it to what this looks like in programming and why we need to use nodes. So that's my attempt. I'll also include some longer videos about this, but I want to kind of just give my brief attempt at covering this quickly. Hopefully that helps.